Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Cana Project. I'm here in beautiful Oregon. It's our last day, and then we're in the morning start heading east. Going to cut diagonally across the country till we get to our new home in Greenville, South Carolina. Next week I'll be broadcasting from South Carolina, Lord willing. I want to warn you two things. One, I got a little dog here, Milo, and sometimes he starts barking. So in the middle of the teaching, he may just lose it. And I'm also smoking some ribs right over there. And sometimes the smoker will start making noise. So if you hear that, just pretend you don't hear it. But anyway, so ribs over there, dog over there, beautiful Oregon behind me. Well, we are continuing our study of the book of Genesis, and we're closing in on the end of it. We probably have maybe 3 more lessons in the book of Genesis, and I've been thinking maybe doing an epistle, maybe First and Second Thessalonians for our next study, but we'll figure that out later. First, we have to finish strong in the book of Genesis, one of the greatest pieces of literature in all of the world. Genesis is so important and so amazing. We're studying right now the final main character of Genesis. Remember, we started with in the beginning God, and then mankind, and mankind falls. And then God starts a relationship with a man called Abram, soon to be Abraham. And through Abraham, he reveals himself and he says, you're going to be my people, and I'm going to bless you, and through you with all of the nations of the earth be blessed. So then Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons, and one of them is Joseph. And now our story for this last 10 chapters focuses on Joseph and the plan that God is unveiling. Now, every one of us, there's that little smoker thing. Every one of us should keep the story of Joseph in our minds and in our hearts. It's a story that will keep us centered in the middle of the craziness of life. And when we're in the midst of the unthinkable, the story of Joseph should be there with us. You know the unthinkable, right? You know what I mean by that? The sudden layoff, and now you don't know how you're going to feed your family. The relationship explosion, and now everything is different. The out of nowhere doctor's report, and you feel like you're watching a movie, but it's you hearing the doctor. And you ask, Lord, where are you? What happened? Why have you abandoned me? My God, why have you forsaken me is the way that feels sometimes. The fact is that God has not abandoned you, and he is right there. And when you're going through something like the unthinkable, he's not at a distance watching, but he is right in the middle of it with you. Right now, he is right in the middle of whatever you're going through with you. And he's closer to you than your next breath. Sometimes we don't have the sense of his presence. We have a version of the dark night of the soul where we can't even feel God. But not only is he there, but because of God, our suffering is not pointless. God is at work in us, transforming us. And sometimes we see that even the suffering was vital to what he did in us and what he taught us in creating his heart in us. A heart of compassion and love, a heart of gentleness and faith. So often I've seen after a fiery trial, when the unthinkable comes and happens, not everybody responds this way, but I've seen people respond where they come out of it with more compassion, more grace, more kindness, more mercy than they ever had before. And a lot of those things come only through suffering. Now, Romans 8:28 should never be quoted glibly or insensitively to a person who is suffering. You should never just quote this scripture to someone who's suffering. That's not wise. But it's true nonetheless. Romans 8:28 that says, And we know that all things work for good to those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. And man, do we see that in this story. We will, you haven't seen it yet, but it's going to unfold here in a minute. God's purpose coming through this incredible experience that Joseph is going through. We won't see the full story for a couple weeks because at this point, Joseph is still on his downward trajectory. Some of y'all are saying, well, baby, I feel it. I'm on my downward trajectory. Hang in there. God's going to show up. Look at Joseph's trajectory. He's a favored son of a father. And then he's jumped by his brothers and sold into slavery. In slavery, he rises to run the whole household. And then he's falsely accused of attempted rape and thrown into prison. And before he is exalted to unimaginable heights, which is going to come in just a couple chapters, he needs to descend a little bit more. So here we go. Genesis 39:19. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Once again, I think he was angry at his wife, not so much at Joseph. But Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Sound familiar? He's in prison now, and the same thing happens in prison that happened at Potiphar's house. Joseph just rises to leadership over the prison so that the warden doesn't worry about anything that Joseph oversees. It's going to be handled well, and it's going to be handled right. Once again, in the midst of a fiery trial, Joseph's character becomes evident. Now, he no longer has the run of a luxurious house. He is in prison. He refers to it as a dungeon later. Prison today, and I have a lot of friends who have done time, is no cakewalk. It can be horrible. But prisons in the ancient world were beyond belief. And in the midst of a dungeon in this prison, Joseph is hardworking, integrous, which I don't think is a word, faithful, responsible, and on and on. Soon, he's running the joint. Think about that. He's thrown into prison unjustly, and soon he's running the joint. The warden doesn't have to worry about anything under Joseph's care. Man, that would be Christ's followers on their jobs. I wish that's what we were known for. That Christ following employees would shine for how hard they work, how faithful they are. They show up early, they stay late. Every job they do is as conscientiously done as possible, like Joseph. It's not always the case, I'm sorry to say. I've worked with a lot of quote-unquote believers, but enough said. So Joseph is back to running a place, but God is not done engineering something amazing. God's plan continues. Genesis 40, verse 1. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with the two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them into custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. So the cupbearer, the one who pours the wine for Pharaoh, and the chief baker, the one who baked for Pharaoh, they both, whatever they get on his wrong side, and he throws them both in prison. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he intended them. These are two very important prisoners, and they'll remember how you treat them. And so to make sure that they are well taken care of, he says, Joseph, I want you to take care of these two cats. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. So now dreams are coming into the story, and a big dream is going to happen soon. It's going to impact the entire history of Israel. But for right now, it's the precursor, or two dreams that the cupbearer and the baker have. When Joseph came to the next morning, he saw them and they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in his custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "Well, we both had dreams," they answered, but there was no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, it blossomed, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." So this is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. And within 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift your head up and restore you to your position. And you're going to put the Pharaoh's cup in his hand again, and as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well for you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. He says, okay, so here's the interpretation. It's going to be incredible. You're going to be restored. And when you get restored, remember me, bro. I'm stuck here for something I didn't do. So the wine pourer receives this beautiful interpretation, wonderful interpretation. So the baker is listening in, and he gets pretty excited. He goes, ooh, do mine. And so Joseph says, okay, let's do yours. And when the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Verse 18, this is what it means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. And within 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift off your head and hang you on a tree. And the birds will eat away your flesh. Can you imagine the baker's face dropping? He's all excited, man, because he heard his homie get a great interpretation. And now he goes, tell me. And he goes, oh, your dream? You're going to get executed in 3 days. It's going to be bad, bro. Can you almost see the baker going, can I have his interpretation? And Joseph saying, sorry, vato, no can do. And the baker going, chale. Chale is Spanish slang for lame. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of the officials. So he has these 2 guys here. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that once again he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in the interpretation. Then verse 23. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Once again, a bad break for Joseph, but God is in the middle of it. It is critical that Joseph stay right where he is for a couple more years, because God is putting together an amazing timetable. God is not finished positioning Joseph. Remember that when you suffer, God is not finished positioning us. Sold into slavery, falsely accused of attempted rape, thrown into prison, and now forgotten by someone who should have remembered him and helped him. But now he is positioned for an incredible moment in God's plan, as God is creating a people who he will use to bring about his incredible plan of salvation for planet Earth. Okay, so we find ourselves in the middle of the mud. We find ourselves going through terrible things, horrific trials, the unimaginable, as I said earlier. So here's what we learn from Joseph so far. Here's what we do. Ready? Here we go. We start by saying, Lord, I trust you. There might not be one molecule in your body that feels that, but that's not a feeling thing. It's a choice. Lord, I trust you. I don't see the rhyme or reason of what's going on right now. It makes no sense to me. But I trust you. In the middle of this hell that I'm going through, I trust you. Second, Lord, how do I respond in the most Christ-like way possible? Lord, how do I partner with you? Here in the hospital, here in the home as everyone's crying and weeping, here at the office where people are losing their jobs, whatever. How do I reflect you? How do I partner with you? How do I walk with you in the middle of whatever you're doing here? Even if I don't see it, Lord, I know that you are doing something good, and good is going to come of it. I just don't see it. I just don't get it. I don't see any way. But how do I extend as your hands, your feet, your mouth, your ears, your eyes, your touch? Third, Lord, is there something to surrender in me? Are these trials revealing? Is this heat revealing something that I need to surrender to you? I remember a story about how they used to purify silver back in the day. The silversmith would put the silver in its kind of raw form into a big pot and turn the heat up. Soon the silver would become molten and start to bubble and boil. All of a sudden the impurities would rise to the top, and the silversmith would clear off the dross, they called it, the impurities, clear them off. As they bubble to the top, clear them off. And it said the silversmith would know when the silver was pure, when it was refined, when the silversmith could see his reflection in the silver. Well, the fiery trials that we go through, oftentimes they are bringing us to the point of surrender, of release, of recognizing. And when we do, we yield, we surrender. And God clears away the dross, and soon our lives reflect him in a way they never did before. So Lord, is there something to surrender in me? 3. So now 4. Lord, in the midst of this furnace, I give you praise. I'm not telling you easy stuff right now. I'm not telling you Pollyannish stuff of everything's going to be good. No, we're talking you're going through hell. But in the middle of hell, a sign that you're becoming the person that God made you to be is in the middle of the furnace. You make a choice and you say, and Lord, I give you praise. And then lastly, when you're going through hell, repeat step 1. Lord, I trust you. I don't see any rhyme or reason in this, but I trust you. I think it was Churchill who said, when you're going through hell, keep going. Now, I don't know that Joseph is doing all these 5 things that I listed, but man, he is shining in this craziness. He is putting God first in the craziness, and as a result, God is about to use him in an amazing way. And this story takes a major turn next week as Pharaoh has a dream, and Joseph is in a position to interpret it and change the history of Israel. Okay, well, thank you for listening in today, and I hope it was helpful. And but this story continues next week. I want to thank you for your support and your encouragement, and for listening in each week. I love doing this together with you, and I'll do it as long as God gives me a green light. So let me pray a blessing and we'll be done. The Lord bless you and the Lord keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, God bless you. I'll see you next week from South Carolina. Bye-bye.